Hello everybody, it's Sarah, and today it is time for me to share with you my favorite video that I film each year, which is my Pride recommendations video. So today it's all about adult fantasy that is oh so beautifully queer. I have already done 2 of those videos in the past, so usually these types of videos are just me talking about my favorite queer adult fantasy that I read in the past year, because everything else I did already talk about. I do think I found at least one book though that I read like previously to the past year that is queer that I haven't mentioned in any of my other videos, because for some reason I think in my other 2 videos I very much focused on high fantasy. I'm not sure why I didn't add that book anyway, but it's in there now because I wanted to talk about it. And so yeah, the previous 2 videos will be linked down below if there are any books that you're missing, and go and check them out. Also, at first I was really concerned that I wouldn't find enough books for this video, because for some reason all the queer books that I could think of that I read in the past year were sequels, and so I had already talked at least about the first books in the series and I didn't want to mention them again and stuff. But as you can see behind me, I still found a good chunk of books. So before we get into the books, which I will keep kind of short, I won't talk too much about each of the books because I do actually have full reviews for most of them, so those will be linked down below. But before I get into it, let's once again cover what for me makes a queer book. Basically, for me, a queer book is if the characters are queer. With the characters are queer, I mean the main characters being queer, or at least one of the main characters being queer, or like just most of the side characters being queer. If the world building in a high fantasy is just exceptionally queer, which for me is quite a high bar, so you can't just have casual queerness, but you know, the world building in and of itself has to be very queer. Or if I know that the author is queer, then it's also a queer book for me. And so with those 3 characteristics being covered, let's jump into the books, and I'm gonna talk about them in no particular order. Let's just start here on this side. First, I have Black Leopard, Red Wolf by Marlon James. This is actually a book that I only read this year. I read it in January, and I do have the second book on my TBR for June. I haven't gotten into it yet though. This book is written by a Jamaican queer author, and the main character, Tracker, himself also is queer. It follows Tracker, who is one of the best, as his name suggests, trackers in his country, and one day he gets the mission to search this very specific boy, and so he kind of teams up with some other very interesting characters and tries to find this boy. And the concept of this entire series is that each book pretty much follows the same story. Each book slightly expands on the story as well, but each book basically follows the same story, but we follow the story from a different perspective. And so Tracker is our first perspective for the first book. Although I do have to warn for this book, it does get quite dark, and I would also look up trigger warnings. Also very much trigger warnings, which was actually why I, you know, kind of hesitated, or why I didn't know if I wanted to put this book into this recommendations list or not. But Tracker does deal a lot with internalized homophobia and also a lot of misogyny. Like, Tracker is not a likable character. Why I ended up putting it on this list regardless is because he's not supposed to be a likable character, and within narrative, in my opinion, his views are very much challenged. And for me personally, I just find the writing style and the narrative style of this story really interesting. So yeah, I just want to talk about it somewhat regularly, because I feel like there's so many mixed feelings on this series. Some of them I understand, but some of them are just like, you know, it's just a very interesting book, and not everyone can handle that. If you can't handle it because of the homophobia and misogyny, that's another thing, you know, but generally speaking. Yeah, so that's the first book for this list. Next, I have Not Good for Maidens by Tori Bovalino. This is a retelling of the ballad The Goblin Market by, I forgot who that ballad originally is from. And in it we follow Louisa, who does not believe in magic. Years ago, before her birth, her mom and aunt fled from the UK to the US from something. She doesn't really know what they fled from. However, one day when she gets a call from her cousin, and that call just ends abruptly and she just finds out that her cousin vanished, she might find out what her mom and her aunt fled from. This book is on this list because our main character Louisa is asexual, and then also there's a second POV character that we get who is sapphic. The asexuality does not play into the story that much, but you know, if your sexuality a lot of times is something that is an absence of something, and the story itself isn't really a romance in the first place, it's kind of hard to actively pull that into the story. However, there are quite a few scenes, especially at the beginning, where Louisa talks about her asexuality and also talks about struggling with it and talks about coming out, and like, if she's, I don't remember if she actually came out already at the beginning of the story, but you know, it's a big part of her character building at the very beginning of the story. And so yeah, I did also enjoy this one. I pretty much enjoyed all these books. Like, I gave none of these books under 3 stars, and all of the books were books that I had fun with. Not all of them were books that I loved, but this one I highly enjoyed. Next is the book that I don't actually remember if I put it onto a list previously or not, so I'm gonna keep myself even shorter with this one. And I'm talking about The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Gornichech. This is also a retelling. It's a retelling of Norse mythology, not one specific myth, but it's kind of a retelling of the stuff that happens within the prose Edda, I think, generally, but from the point of view of one of the characters that, you know, it doesn't appear a lot, and that is Angrboda, who is Loki's lover in original mythology, and she is the mother of 3 of Loki's children, of the Midgard snake, of the Fenris wolf, and also of Hel. And so in this retelling we follow Angrboda. We follow her as she lives apart from the gods of Asgard, which she does in mythology as well. She's not one of the gods. We follow her relationship with Loki, but we also follow her as she falls in love with someone else. And that someone else is a woman, so this story is also sapphic. It also made me tear up by the end, and I am very excited for her new book, like Gornichech's new book. I'm not quite sure if it came out like this month or last month, or if it's about to come out quite soon, one or the other. Next, I have a first book in a series that I'm sure a lot of you have heard about, and that is The Final Strife by Sara El Arifi, which is the first book in, I forgot what the series is called, I have to be honest. So the plot of this book is set within a country where you kind of have 3 different castes based on blood. So you have people who have red blood. I think it was red blood. Yeah, it was red blood, who are the highest. They are the rulers. They basically can tell everyone else where they're going. You have the blue bloods, who are a lower caste, who are mostly the workers, and who very much lead a horrible life. They cannot escape their situation. They are often killed or tortured by the red bloods for just even the smallest infractions. And then lastly, you have the people with translucent blood, or the ghosts, who have it even worse than the blues, because they are not just indentured servants basically, but as soon as a ghost is born, their tongue is cut out and their hands are cut off. Now, every 10 years there's this competition about who the new ruler of the country is going to be, and just after the last competition, babies were stolen. Red-blooded babies were stolen, and they were raised to take part in the next competition and to become the rulers and to make things better for the blue-blooded people. And so in the story, one of our main characters is one of those babies. However, she kind of has lost her way and has lost the path, and she has to find her way back to it because the next competition is just around the corner. and also there might be another rebellion rising. Who knows? So personally, I really enjoyed it. I wasn't the biggest fan of the writing. In my personal opinion, it was kind of basic. However, in terms of the story, in terms of the plot, in terms of intricacies, in terms of world building, I really enjoyed this. This also, once again, is sapphic. Our main one of our main characters is sapphic. I don't know if they're bisexual. And then our other main character is sapphic, and sapphic as in she likes women, but also men. So yeah, there's a lot of representation there. Once again, I don't remember, like there was one other main character, but I don't remember. Like, yeah, I think actually they were non-binary. I think they had they them pronouns. I think that was it, because I was like, they were also queer in some way, but I don't remember how exactly, but that was it. They were non-binary. So there's also gender concepts outside of the binary in this world building as well. So yeah, that's it for this recommendation. So currently my battery is blinking, so before we talk about the next book, let me see if my other battery is actually, you know, full. So this battery is not actually full, but let's hope it's full enough to the point where I can load my other battery a little bit. But anyway, the next book that I want to talk about is the book Idris by Sonia Dean. This is urban fantasy with some horror elements. It's also, once again, sapphic. Most of the queer books that I read are just sapphic, to be honest. But in this story we follow Devon, who is part of a people called the Book Eaters, which means they don't eat as humans do, they eat books, and that's their nourishment. However, she flees from them after she discovers that her daughter is something called, if I remember correctly, a mind eater. Was it her daughter? Maybe it was her son. It was her son. Her son is something called a mind eater, her child in any case. And they usually don't lead amazing lives. Like mind eaters, as the name suggests, they eat the brains of other people, and so they're feared. Also, they kind of at some point lose control a little bit as well, and so they're just treated horribly by the family because there's like only this one drug that can basically keep them sane. However, the family holds back the drug so they can keep control of the mind eaters. And so Devon, being a desperate mother, does not want to lose her child, and so she takes him and she flees with him. And now she's on the lookout to see if maybe she can get her hands on this drug some way and also still stay out of the grasp of her family. I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed the writing style of this. I really enjoyed like the mother-child relationship, the conflicting feelings that Devon has about her child a lot of the times, because, and this is not a spoiler because it literally happens in the first or second chapter, because she kind of provides victims for her child whose minds he can eat. And so yeah, there's a lot of conflicting feelings there, but yeah, I really enjoyed it, found it really interesting, gave it 4 stars, so it made this list. Next one was God Killer by Hannah Kana. I also read this year and I really enjoyed it. Fair warning though, it is quite short, so it does lack in terms of depth, in terms of what I usually prefer with my adult high fantasy. However, if you go into it with those expectations, I think then you can still really enjoy this book. Within this book, you have this kingdom where gods are outlawed, and so you have a specific job that is being a god killer. Those people go around killing gods. And our main character is such a god killer. She's a woman who in her childhood was supposed to be sacrificed to a god, and whose entire family was sacrificed to a god, and so now she just has a lot of rage inside of her and this intense hatred. And so she now goes and kills gods. However, when one day she meets a young child who needs her help, she maybe finds another calling aside from just killing gods. Also, our main character is bisexual. Aside from that, sexuality does not play that much of a role within the story. However, this is one of those fantasy stories that have become more and more common, where queerness is just very normalized. It's not necessarily an active part of the world building. However, you just constantly come across queer characters in the entirety of the book. One of the main characters is queer. I'm pretty sure another one of the main characters is queer as well. At least there's some very homoerotic tensions between him and another character. but you know, it's never explored what their past is exactly, so I can't be sure. And so yeah, this was the third to last book on this list. So there's one series left and one book, but once again my battery is blinking, so maybe I'll wait 10 minutes for my other battery to load and then let's continue on. Okay, so one last try and let's see if we can get through the last two books. First I have the Forever Sea and The Endless Song by Joshua Philip Johnson. This is a duology set in a world where you have the Forever Sea, which basically is this huge prairie of grass, of magical grass, pretty much. And this magical grass is like tens of hundreds of meters deep. No one knows what's at the bottom of the Forever Sea. However, above it you have ships flying over it with magic, and our main character is one of the people who can fly such a ship. She is a Hearthfire keeper. Hearthfire is what keeps the ships going, and she was in fact taught by one of the best Hearthfire keepers out there, her grandmother, who also is a legendary captain. And when our main character with the crew that she's traveling with comes back to her home to dock, she finds out that her grandmother walked into the Forever Sea and she's gone. And so our main character decides, you know what? I'm gonna find out what happens. And that's basically what these two books are. Our main character is Sapphic. The main relationship in the story is also Sapphic. And I really love the world building in this series. I loved how whimsical the world building and the magic was. I really found our main character a very interesting character. She is not necessarily a likable character and she doesn't necessarily make good decisions. She oftentimes is very egotistical, especially in the first book, and she's very driven by what she wants to do. She wants to find her grandmother and she will do anything it takes to, you know, get in that direction. In the second book she then has to deal with the consequences of those actions quite a bit. But yeah, I really enjoyed this duology and I can highly recommend it. And then the last book I want to talk about is one of my reads of May that actually only arrived yesterday. I waited for this video for this book to arrive. And the book I'm talking about is Witch King by Martha Wells. I got the Illumicrate edition and it's so pretty and I love it. This book is a standalone fantasy following Kai, who is a demon who used to be known as the Witch King. And he kind of was part of this big battle in the past, which you find out about in some of the chapters because this book actually is told in a dual timeline. So the past timeline is Kai and kind of finding out how he got the name of the Witch King. In the present, in the first chapter, Kai wakes up and he's imprisoned. And he finds out also that his best friend is imprisoned with him. And so the rest of the book is them kind of just breaking out, trying to find out how they ended up in prison because both of them have no clue, and also trying to find his best friend's wife. And so that's just kind of the two timelines. Now, how is this queer? First of all, the best friend is lesbian and very angry. She is just amazing. But also Kai himself, while it is never really officially confirmed in the story, I would personally say that Kai is very much queer. Like, he is gay, Achillean, and asexual. I would also put him somewhere on the asexual spectrum, actually. And so, like, when I say it's not confirmed in story, it's not the type of not confirmed so we can just, you know, kind of also have plausible deniability vibes, but it just simply doesn't really play into the story and doesn't really come up. However, there are a few male characters that Kai seems to have a very strong connection to, and I would personally just put Kai somewhere on the ace spectrum. Like, that's the vibes that I get from him. If someone from the ace community has read this and is in my comment section, please tell me that you get the same vibes from it. But yeah, that was just my personal vibes. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really fun. However, going into this, do not expect an epic story. Very much expect just a very small and contained story with some epic backgrounds, but it's really just that. It's the backgrounds. Also, you might have heard a lot of noise in this entire video, and that's because I once again have construction work done on the building across the street from me. I hate it. I genuinely hate it so much. Anyway, that was it for my queer books, queer fantasy recommendations for 2023. Tell me in the comments down below, did I give you some new books to buy for your TBR? If you have read any of the books, tell me that you enjoyed them just as much as I did. If you enjoyed this video, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. All the links to my social media as well as to my book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, where I read one adult high fantasy book written by a woman or genderqueer person per month, will be left linked down below. Also in June for the book club, we're reading The Witch King currently, so if I made you want to pick it up now, then join us on Discord. And with all of that said, I hope I'll see you soon.